Hi, fourth graders. We're back with chapter 12. Sound the alarm, shouted Vicus, and the place exploded in frantic activity. Horns began blowing, people rushed in and out, bats swooped in for orders and disappeared again without taking time to land. It was panic. Everyone ignored Gregor as they shifted into emergency mode. He wanted to ask Vicus what was going on, but the old man stood in the high hall in a blur of bat wings giving commands. Gregor went out on the balcony and could see Regalia swimming like a beehive. Many rats were coming. The Underlanders were going into defense mode. Suddenly, he realized they were at war. The terrifying thought in the height of the balcony made Gregor lightheaded. As he stumbled back inside, a strong hand caught his arm. "Gregor the Overlander, prepare yourself. We leave shortly," said Vicus. "For where? Where are we going?" asked Gregor. "To rescue your father," said Vicus. "Now? We're going to go now with the rats attacking?" said Gregor. "I mean, there's a war starting, right?" "Not any war. We believe is the war foretold in the prophecy of Gray. The one that may bring about the complete annihilation of our people. Wipe out their people," said Vicus. "Pursuing the quest for your father is our best hope of surviving it," said Vicus. "Well, I can take Boots, right?" asked Gregor. "I mean, I am taking her," he corrected himself. "Yes, Boots shall come," said Vicus. "What should I do? You said to prepare myself," said Gregor. Vicus thought for a second, called Meredith over. "Take him to the museum. Let him choose whatever he thinks will aid him in this journey." "Ah, here is the delegation from Troy," said Vicus. He stepped into another storm of wings. Gregor ran after Meredith, who had sprinted for the door. 3 staircases and several halls later, they arrived at a large chamber filled with loaded shelves. Here is what has fallen from the overland. So there's this big museum, all the stuff that has fallen from the overland, things that we would use. "Remember, what you choose, you must carry," instructed Meredith, thrusting a leather bag with a drawstring into his hands. The shelves were filled with everything, from baseballs to car tires. Gregor wished he had a little more time to look at the stuff more carefully. Some of it must have been hundreds of years old. But time was a luxury he didn't have. He didn't have time. He tried to focus. What could he take that would help him on the journey? What did he need most in the Underland? Light. Remember, there's no light down there. It's kind of like you're in a cave all the time. He found a flashlight in working condition and collected batteries from every single electrical thing that he could find. And then something else caught his eye. It was a hard hat, like construction workers wear. There was a built-in light on the front, so they could see in the inky tunnels beneath New York City. He grabbed the hat and crammed it onto his head. "We must go," ordered Meredith. "We must get your sister and take flight." Gregor turned to follow him, and then he saw it. Oh my gosh. Root beer! An honest to goodness, unopened can, only slightly dented, can of root beer. It looked pretty new. He knew it was an extravagance, a luxury, something that he probably didn't need, that he should only take the essentials. But he had to have it. It was his favorite drink. Plus, it made him think of home. He stuffed the can into his bag. And the nursery was nearby. Gregor ran in and saw Boots sitting happily among 3 Underlander toddlers having a tea party. For a second, he almost changed his mind and left her there. Wouldn't she be safer here in the palace? But then he remembered the palace would soon be under siege by rats. They were coming. Gregor knew he couldn't leave her to face that alone. Whatever happened, they would stay together. Dulcet quickly helped Gregor into a backpack and slid Boots inside. She fastened a small bundle to the base of the backpack. "Catch cloths," she said. "A few toys and some treats. We remember that catch cloths are diapers." "Thanks," said Gregor, grateful someone who had thought of the practical side of traveling with Boots. "Fare you well, sweet Boots," said Dulcet. She kissed the baby's cheek. "Bye-bye, Dulcie. See you soon." That was what they always parted with at Gregor's house. "Don't worry, I'll be back. See you soon." "Yes, I will see you soon," said Dulcet, but her eyes were filled with tears. "Take care, Dulcet," said Gregor, giving her hand an awkward shake. "Fly you high, Gregor. Fly you high, Gregor the Overlander," she said. In the High Hall, the mission was readying for departure. departure. Several bats had lit on the ground and were being loaded with supplies. Gregor saw Henry hugging a painfully thin teenage girl goodbye. She was weeping uncontrollably, despite his attempts to comfort her. "The dreams, brother," she sobbed. "They have worsened. Some terrible evil awaits you." "Do not distress yourself, Nerissa. I have no plans to die," said Henry soothingly. So we have a new character, Nerissa, Henry's sister. "There are evils beyond death," said his sister. "Fly you high, Henry, fly you high." They embraced, and Henry swung up onto his velvety black bat. Gregor watched nervously as the girl came his way. He could never think of the right things to say when people cried. But she had pulled herself together by the time she had reached him. She held a small roll of paper. "For you, Overlander," she said. "Fly you high." And before he could answer, she had moved away, leaning on the wall for support. He opened the paper, which wasn't paper, but some sort of dried animal skin, and saw that the prophecy of Gray had been written carefully upon it. That's so weird, thought Gregor. He had been wishing he could read it again to maybe figure more of it out. He had meant to ask Ficus, but then had forgotten in the rush. "How did she know that I wanted this?" he murmured to Boots. "Nerissa knows many things. She has a gift," said a boy mounting a golden bat beside him. On second glance, Gregor realized it wasn't a boy. It was Luxa. But her hair had been cropped off close to her head. "What happened to your hair?" asked Gregor, stuffing the prophecy into his pocket. "Long locks, long hair. Dangerous in battle," said Luxa. "Well, that's too bad. I mean, it looks good short, too," said Gregor quickly. Luxa burst out laughing. "Gregor the Overlander, think you my beauty is any matter in such times?" So she doesn't care what she looks like. She knows she's going into battle. Gregor's face felt hot with embarrassment. "Well, that's not what I meant." Luxa just shook her head at Henry, who was grinning back at her. "The Overlander speaks true. Cousin, you look like a shorn sheep." "All the better," said Luxa. For who would attack a sheep? "Bah! Bah!" said Boots, and Henry laughed so hard he almost fell off his bat. "Sheep says bah!" Boots said defensively, which set him off again. Gregor almost laughed too. For a moment he had felt as if he were among friends. But these people had a long way to go before he would consider them friends. To cover his slip, he concentrated on finding a comfortable way to carry his leather bag that would leave his hands free. He tied it to the side strap of the pack. When he glanced up, he found Luxa looking at him curiously. "What wear on your head, Overlander?" she asked. "It's a hard hat with a light," said Gregor. He flicked it on and off to show her. He could tell she was itching to try it, but she didn't want to ask. Gregor quickly weighed his options in his head. True, they weren't friends, but it was better to get along with her if he could. He needed her to get his dad. Gregor held out the hat. "Here, check it out." Luxa tried to appear indifferent, like it didn't matter to her, but her fingers worked the light switch eagerly. How do you keep the light inside without air? Does it not get hot on your head? No, it runs on battery. It's electricity, and there's a layer of plastic between the light and your head. You could try it on if you want, said Gregor. Without hesitation, Luxa popped the hat on her head. Vicus has told me about this thing called electricity, she said. She shot the beam of light around the room before returning it to Gregor reluctantly. Here, you must save your fuel. You will begin a new fashion, said Henry cheerfully. He grabbed one of the small stone torches off the wall and laid it on top of his head. Flames seemed to be shooting out of his forehead. What think you, Luxa? What think you? He asked, showing her his profile and exaggerated haughtiness, so he's kind of thinking that he's pretty cool looking. Your hair is alight, she suddenly gasped and pointed. Henry dropped the torch and beat at his hair as Luxa went into hysterics. Realizing it was a joke, Henry caught her in a headlock and rubbed her short hair with his knuckles while she laughed helplessly. She gave him a noogie. For a moment, they could have been a couple kids in the overland. Just a brother and sister, like Gregor and Lizzie, wrestling around. Vicus strode across the hall. You two are in a merry mood, considering we are at war, he said. It's only an excess of spirit. They're just excited, Vicus, said Henry. Save your spirit. You will have need of it where we are going. Ride you with me, Gregor, said Vicus, extending a hand. Gregor swung up behind him on his big gray back. Boots kicked his sides with anticipation. Me ride, shoo, me too, me too, she chirped. Mount up, said Vicus, and Henry and Lexa leaped onto their bats. Gregor could spot Solivet and Merith preparing to leave also. Merith was riding a bat he hadn't seen before. Probably his other bat was recovering. To the air, ordered Solivet, and the 5 bats lifted off in a V formation. As they rose up into the air, Gregor felt like he would burst from excitement and happiness. They were going to get his dad. They would rescue him and take him home, and his mom would smile. I mean, really, really smile again. And there would be holidays to celebrate, not to dread, and music. Well, he was getting ahead of himself. He was breaking his rule right and left, and in a minute he would stop. But for that minute, he would go ahead and imagine as much as he wanted. As they veered sideways over the city of Regalia, Gregor was reminded of the gravity of their task, the seriousness of their task by the manic activity below. The gates to the stadium were being fortified with huge stone slabs. Wagons of food clogged the roads. People carrying children and bundles were hurrying toward the palace. Extra torches were being lit in all the areas, so the city looked almost bathed in sunlight. Wouldn't you want it darker if there's going to be an attack? Asked Gregor. No, but the rats would. We need our eyes to fight. They do not, said Vicus. Most of the creatures in the underland, the crawlers, the bats, the fish, they have no need for light. We humans are lost without it. Gregor tucked that bit of information away in his brain. The flashlight had been the best thing to bring after all. The city quickly gave way to farmland, and Gregor had his first glimpse of how the Underlanders fed themselves. Great fields of some kind of grain grew under a row upon row of hanging white lamps. What runs the lamps? Asked Gregor. They burn with gas from the earth. Your father was most impressed with our fields. He suggested a plan for lighting our city, too, but at the moment, all the light must go for the food, said Vicus. Did an overlander show you how to do that? Asked Gregor. Gregor, we did not leave our minds in the overland when we fell. We have inventors just like you, and light is most precious to us. Think you we poor Underlanders might not have stumbled upon some manner of harnessing that light ourselves, some way of getting that light? Said Vicus, good-naturedly. Gregor felt sheepish. He had sort of thought the Underlanders as kind of backwards. They still used swords and wore funny clothes, but obviously they weren't stupid. His dad said even the cavemen had geniuses among them. Somebody had thought up for the wheel, for Pete's sakes. Solivet flew parallel to them, but she was deep in conversation with a pair of bats that had joined the party. She uncurled a large map on her bat's head and scrutinized it. Is she trying to find where my dad is? Gregor asked. She is forming a plan of attack, said Vicus. My wife leads our warriors. She goes with us not to direct the quest, but to gauge the level of support we might expect from our allies, from our friends. Really? I thought you were in charge. Well, you and Lexa, he said, because really he couldn't tell how that all worked out. Lexa seemed to be able to order people around, but she could get in trouble for stuff too. Lexa will ascend the throne, will take over the throne when she turns 16. Until then, though, Regalia is ruled by a council, like a mayor. I am but a humble diplomat who spends his spare time trying to teach prudence to the royal youth. And you see how well I succeed, Vicus said wryly. He glanced at Henry and Lexa, who were flipping wildly into the sky, trying to knock each other off their bats. Do not let Solivet's gentle demeanor fool you. In the planning of the battles, she is more cunning and wily than Rat. She's smart. Wow, said Gregor. Her gentle demeanor had kind of fooled him. Kind of reminded him of his grandma, I think. Gregor shifted his weight on the bat and something poked his leg. He pulled the prophecy Nerissa had given from him from the pocket and unrolled it. Maybe now would be a good time to ask Vicus some questions. So, do you think you could explain this prophecy, Gray, to me? The prophecy of Gray, corrected Vicus. What of it puzzles you? Well, the whole thing, Gregor thought. But he said, well, maybe we could just go by it piece by piece. A little piece at a time. He studied the poem. Beware, Underlanders. Time hangs by a thread. Well, that seems pretty clear. It was a warning. The hunters are hunted. White water runs red. He asked Vicus to help him unravel the second line. The rats are traditionally the hunters of the Underland, for they would happily track and kill the rest of us. Last night, we hunted them to save you. So the hunters were hunted. White water ran red when we left their bodies to the river. Oh, said Gregor. Something was kind of bothering, but he couldn't put his finger on it. The gnars will strike to extinguish the rest. Are the gnars the rats? He asked. Exactly so, said Vicus. The hope of the hopeless resides in a quest. The quest to get his dad. So, he'd escaped. The Underlanders had saved him, and now they were at war and off on the quest. Gregor suddenly knew what was bothering him. So, like this whole thing is my fault, he said? It never would have happened if I hadn't tried to escape. He thought of the approaching army of rats. What had he done? No, Gregor, put your mind from that, said Vicus. You are but one player in a very, very long and difficult tale. The prophecy of Gray trapped you, as it has trapped us for so long. Gregor was silent, but he didn't exactly feel any better. Read on, said Vicus, and Gregor's head drooped to the page. The lights of Regalia had faded away, and he had to squint to read by the faint torchlight. An overland warrior, a son of the sun, may bring back us light. He may bring back us none. But gather your neighbors and follow his call, or rats will most surely devour us all. So, you say this next part is about me, he said unhappily. Yes, you are the overland warrior for obvious reasons, said Vicus. Although Gregor didn't think the obvious reasons were that obvious. You are a son of the sun, S-O-N, S-U-N. You are a son of the sun as an overlander, but also the son who seeks his father. This is sort of a comedic wordplay Sandwich delighted in. Yeah, he was a real funny guy, said Gregor. Now the lines that follow are almost gray, said Vicus. Sandwich can never clearly see if in fact you succeed in bringing back light or if you fail. But he most adamantly insisted. We attempt the adventure or die by the rat's teeth. So they have to do this journey. Well, that's not too inspiring, said Gregor. But for the first time, Sandwich had struck a chord with him. The possibility that Gregor might fail made the whole prophecy more plausible, believable. What sort of light am I supposed to bring back? Asked Gregor. Is there like a sacred torch or something? Nope, that's a metaphor. By light, Sandwich means life. If the rats can truly extinguish our light, they extinguish our life as well, said Vicus. A metaphor? Gregor thought an actual torch would be a little easier to bring back. How could he bring back some metaphor thing he didn't really understand? That could be tricky, he said. He read on. 2 over, 2 under of royal descent, 2 flyers, 2 crawlers, 2 spinners ascent. What are all those 2s about? Asked Gregor. That tells us whom we must persuade to accompany us on this quest. We are proceeding as if the 2 over are you and your sister. The 2 under of royal descent are Luxa and Henry, because they're like a king and queen. Henry's sister, Nerissa, as you might have gleaned, was not a possible choice. Flyers are the bats. Crawlers are cockroaches. Spinners are spiders. We go now to assemble our neighbors in the order that the prophecy dictates. And first the bats. The number of bats had been increasing as they flew. Henry led the party into a vast cave. Gregor gave a little jump when he realized the ceiling was bumpy with hundreds and hundreds of hanging bats. But don't we already have bats? Asked Gregor. We need official permission to take them on the quest, said Vicus. Oh, though also there are matters of war to discuss. A towering cylinder of stone sat in the center of the cave. Its sides were as slick as those of the palace. On the round, flat top, a group of bats had waited. Vicus turned back to Gregor and whispered, "We humans know you to be the warrior, but other creatures may have doubts. Whoever you think you may or may not be, it is essential that our neighbors believe that you are the one. Because otherwise they probably wouldn't go on this quest if they thought that he wasn't the one that was in the prophecy." Gregor was trying to unwind that in his head when they landed next to the bats on the huge pillar of stone. The humans all dismounted, got off. Deep bows and greetings were followed on both sides. One particularly impressive silvery white bat appeared to be in charge. "Queen Athena," Vicus said, and presented him. "Meet you, Gregor the Overlander." "Be you the warrior? Be you he who he calls?" asked the bat in a soft purr. "Well, actually, Gregor saw Vicus frown and pulled up short. He was about to go into a spiel about how he wasn't the warrior, but then what? Vicus had whispered something about others believing he was the one, that there was a war beginning. The bats weren't likely to send off valuable flyers on a wild goose chase. If he denied that he was the warrior now, the quest would be called off, and his father would be as good as dead. That sealed it. Gregor stood up straight and tried to control the quaver that slipped in his voice. "Yeah, I am the warrior. I am he who calls." The bat was still for a moment, then nodded. "It is he." She spoke with such certainty that for a second Gregor succeeded in thinking of himself as a warrior. A bold, brave, powerful warrior that the Underlanders would tell stories about for centuries. He could almost see himself leading a squadron of bats into battle, stunning the rats, saving the Underlanders from "Giggle, Appy," announced Boots. And there he stood, a boy in a goofy hard hat, with a beat-up flashlight and a bunch of batteries he hadn't even tested to see if they still had juice. The mighty warrior excused himself and changed a diaper.